The knife was still in the sink. That's what I remember most. Not the words she said. Not how she avoided eye contact. Not even the way my throat closed up when I tried to speak. Just the knife, caked with avocado from her toast. A little smear of red. Not blood, just strawberry jam. I stood there staring at it, hearing her voice echo somewhere behind me like a broadcast I couldn't turn off. "I just don't feel like I owe you my time anymore," she was saying. The jam, I noticed, had dried at the edges. She hadn't rinsed it, just tossed it in, like she always did, for me to clean. But that day, I didn't move. Not toward the sink. Not toward her. I stood frozen in that kitchen like a ghost who hadn't figured out he was dead yet. She walked out of the room after she said it. No shouting. No tears. No drama. Like she'd just canceled a haircut. "I don't owe you my time." I stayed there for hours. Didn't move. The light changed outside. I think it rained at one point. Or maybe that was just the sound of the AC kicking on. Everything blurred after that. You ever sit in silence so long you start to hear your own blood? I didn't pack anything that night. Didn't Google therapists or write a pros and cons list or pour whiskey in a mug like in the movies. I just stared at that knife in the sink. That stupid, jam-stained knife. And when she went to bed, without even a good night, I knew. It was already over. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just stopped needing me. Like a power strip, she unplugged without even checking what was connected. At 3:14 a.m., I took the knife from the sink, washed it clean, dried it, put it back in the drawer where it belonged. Then I walked out the door and disappeared. No text, no note, no goodbye. I left my phone on the kitchen counter next to the fruit bowl filled with fake lemons. But before I walked away for good, I did one last thing. Something that made sure she'd remember me. Not with guilt, not with love, with fear. When I left that night, I didn't slam the door or even take the car. The silence behind me was loud enough to fill every street on my walk out of that neighborhood. I didn't cry, though my throat felt bruised from holding it all in. The stars looked too clean for what was happening in my life. I remember thinking it was almost disrespectful, how calm the world stayed while everything in me was breaking. I didn't plan to disappear. Not exactly. It just happened in the most ordinary way possible. You know when something snaps, and suddenly you realize you've been living someone else's life? That was me at 3 in the morning, walking past mailboxes and half-lit porches with nothing but my wallet, keys, and a heart that felt like an abandoned construction site. I went to a motel outside of town, the kind where the curtains never fully close, and the air smells like cigarette ghosts. I didn't sleep. I kept seeing that knife in the sink, that jam, that sentence. "I don't owe you my time anymore." It kept replaying, like a broken recording, over and over until it stopped sounding like English and started sounding like static. By morning, I thought maybe she'd text. Maybe a single "Where are you?" or "Can we talk?" But there was nothing. My phone stayed silent, except for one notification that changed everything. It was from our shared home security app. Motion detected. Living room. 7:02 a.m. I opened it. There she was, Odessa, standing in the kitchen in her robe, holding her coffee like it weighed 50 pounds. She noticed the phone on the counter. My keys missing. The empty hook where my jacket used to hang. Then her eyes fell on the table. That's when she froze. It took her a few seconds before she sat down. I could tell she wasn't breathing right. Her hand went to her mouth. She whispered something I couldn't hear. What she saw was simple, but it hit her harder than anything I could have written. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a photo. It wasn't even something dramatic. It was that yellow plate, the one she loved and I despised. Only now it was shattered, laid out carefully on the table like a puzzle that could never be solved again. Each piece had a word written in black marker. Tiny, messy handwriting. My handwriting. The word spelled out. "You made everything look whole, but it was always cracked." She covered her mouth and started crying. Not softly, not the kind of cry you can brush off. It was ugly, full-body crying. The kind you do when you realize you've gone too far to fix anything. She leaned forward, trying to gather the pieces, but they kept slipping from her hands, cutting her fingers. I watched through that tiny screen, and for the first time in months, she finally looked at something the way she used to look at me, with emotion. Real, painful emotion. Then she grabbed her phone. I could see her dialing my number, waiting, pacing. But my phone, the one she was calling, was still right there on the counter beside her. Vibrating, mocking, ringing into emptiness. When she realized, She stopped. Her hands were shaking. She sat down again and whispered something that made my stomach twist. I couldn't hear it, but I could read her lips. She said, "He actually did it." That part still plays in my head sometimes. Not because she sounded scared, but because she sounded small. Like a person who finally lost control of a game they didn't know they were playing. I closed the security feed and turned the app off completely. I didn't need to see what came next. Somewhere out there, Odessa was sitting at that table surrounded by broken pieces of the life she stopped caring about. And me? I was sitting in a dark motel room, realizing I'd done something irreversible. I hadn't hurt her physically. I hadn't shouted, hadn't hit, hadn't written anything cruel. But I'd left a silence behind that would follow her for the rest of her life. And for the first time in years, I felt nothing. It took her 3 days to realize I wasn't bluffing. The first day, she probably assumed it was a tantrum. A silent protest. Something dramatic and pitiful, which honestly, I get it. I've always been the overthinker. The apologizer. The one who says it's fine when it isn't. I'd never been the type to walk away. Not even during our worst nights, when she'd shut down mid-argument and leave me talking to furniture. But that morning when she saw the shattered plate and no sign of me, something shifted behind her eyes. Like she was realizing too late that people who bend long enough eventually learn to break. On the second day, she started calling my friends. Not with panic, with concern. You could hear it in the phrasing. "Hey, have you heard from Calven? He's not home." Not, "I'm worried." Not, "I think something's wrong." Just, "He's not here." Like I was a delayed package. They told her no, of course. Most of them hadn't heard from me in months. She made me cut people off, not by force, but by frequency. All the, "I just want a quiet night, can we skip game night again?" comments. Eventually the invites stop, and so does your circle. She tried my mom. Bold move. They never liked each other. My mom didn't even fake it. "Odessa, have you spoken to Calven?" "Mom, have you checked where you left him last?" Click. Day 3 is where the real unraveling began. I know this because I left a trail, not a breadcrumb trail, not a map, but a thread. Fragile, almost invisible. But if she pulled it, it would lead somewhere she couldn't unsee. She started in the trash. I knew she would. She always checks the trash. Every time we argue, she goes through the bags, looking for signs I've been drinking again or hiding something. That's how little she trusted me by the end. But this time, I left something for her. Not a bottle, not a receipt. A photo, folded 3 times, creased down the middle. It was us, 3 years ago, at the state fair. Odessa on my shoulders, holding a stuffed bear I won her, laughing so hard her eyes squinted shut. The version of her that I missed so much I started wondering if I imagined her. On the back, I wrote, "You used to look at me like I mattered." She found it. I know because she didn't throw it back. She kept it, put it in her hoodie pocket like a kid who'd just been told a secret and wasn't sure what to do with it. Then came the digging, the searching. She tried logging into our shared Dropbox folder. I had already changed the password. She called my work, left a message for my supervisor, saying it was a personal emergency. He didn't respond. I had quit a week before I disappeared. Cashed out and used PTO, emptied my desk, walked away with a cardboard box and a tight smile. She even went to the mailbox, pulled letters apart with shaking hands, hoping to find what? A clue? An address? A sign that I was still within arm's reach? But what she found was something she didn't expect. Inside one envelope was a bank statement. My new account, opened 3 weeks earlier. Withdrew everything from our joint savings. Left her name off the application. A clean slate. The number was written in bold. $8,132.74. That's what she was worth to me in the end. She sat on the porch and cried for an hour. No makeup, no audience. Just her and that envelope and the reality of a life that was no longer shared. I watched it all from the car parked half a block away. I know. I sound insane, but I wasn't stalking her. I just needed to see if it would hurt her. If I ever mattered at all. If she would crumble the way I had every night she rolled away from me in bed like I didn't exist. And here's the part that stuck with me, haunted me, actually. After she cried, after she blew her nose and stared at that bank statement like it was a confession, she did something I never expected. She smiled. Not fully, not with joy, but with relief. And that's when I realized, she never thought I'd actually leave. But now that I had, she didn't have to pretend anymore. She was free, but so was I, and I wasn't done yet. I wasn't planning on contacting her. That wasn't the point of disappearing. The whole idea was to let her sit in the hollow echo of her own choices, to feel the weight of my absence the same way I had carried the weight of her apathy. But sometimes, the past gives you gifts. Or maybe weapons. Either way, I got one the morning I opened my old hard drive and remembered the archive. It was a folder, labeled simply, archived_OD. OD for Odessa. She used to joke that it made her sound ancient, like some forgotten Greek ruin. I used to laugh. Now it just felt poetic. Inside were backups, chat logs, screenshots, old photos. Most of it I hadn't looked at since our 3rd year of marriage. That was the year she got distant the first time. Said she was struggling with direction. That her work wasn't fulfilling. That she needed space to find herself. Back then, I believed her. Back then, I didn't notice that her reset weekends always followed a pattern. Same timing, same excuses, same silence when she came back smelling like hotel shampoo. But now, with distance and clarity as my allies, I started connecting the dots. And there it was, buried in a subfolder labeled workstudy_2019. Screenshots from a cloud-based chat app her research team used. She had forgotten the account was connected to my cloud backup, an accident from when we shared her laptop during a house move. She must have never noticed. But I had it all. Flirting, late-night emojis, inside jokes that weren't ours. And then, buried deep in a message thread from a man named Reed, one line that burned itself into my brain. You'll always be more than a priority. You're the escape. That was October 2019, 3 months before she needed space. 2 weeks before her solo wellness retreat. I sat there in the motel room, rereading it like a lunatic, the sounds of a lawnmower droning outside, my dog snoring in the corner, the light from the screen bleaching the room cold. I didn't rage, didn't throw the laptop. That's not me. Instead, I took a breath, opened a secure browser, and typed in the name of the university where Odessa worked. I clicked on Forgot Password, typed her old recovery email, one I helped her set up years ago, and requested a reset link. It worked. She had never changed it. The inbox opened like a treasure chest. I wasn't looking to ruin her. I wasn't looking to go public or expose her. I just needed answers. Closure. Something real. I needed to know how long she'd been gone before I ever walked out the door. The emails told a different story than the one she always fed me. She hadn't fallen out of love. She had fallen in love twice. Once with Reed, then with someone named Calven, a graduate student she had mentored. Much younger, flirty, arrogant. He sent her Spotify playlists and photos of his tattoos. She called him trouble in a hoodie. I wanted to vomit. There were no photos of them together. But there was one line in her outbox that made my lungs go tight. If Calven ever finds out, I'll lose everything. She sent it in February. To her friend Maya. I remembered that week. She had been overly kind. Made me pancakes on a Wednesday. Sat next to me on the couch for the first time in weeks. I thought we were healing. I thought we were trying again. She wasn't trying. She was hiding. And I had been right to disappear. Still, I didn't respond. Didn't forward the emails. Didn't leave evidence. I just took screenshots and saved them under a new folder. Truth. Not for revenge. Not for blackmail. For me. I needed a record that I hadn't imagined all of it. That the erasure I'd felt wasn't some failure of my masculinity or ambition or attention. It was her. She had already checked out long before she told me I was no longer her priority. But what happened next that I didn't plan? That night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring out. Then another one. Then a third. Then a text. It was from Maya. Call me. It's about Odessa. Something's happened. When my phone buzzed that night, I almost ignored it. Maya's name meant nothing at first. Then it hit me. Odessa's friend, the one from the art department, the woman with the always knowing smirk and the habit of oversharing other people's secrets like they were party favors. I hadn't seen or spoken to her in over a year. For her to be calling me now could only mean trouble. I let the first call die, then the second, but by the third, my nerves couldn't stand the silence anymore. I picked up, half expecting sarcasm, half ready to hang up. What I got instead was shaking breath on the other end. Calven, you need to listen to me. Don't hang up. Her voice was raw, anxious. I could hear cars in the background, a siren fading somewhere far away. It's Odessa, she said. She's missing. The words didn't make sense at first. I thought maybe she was exaggerating. Maybe Odessa was hiding. avoiding responsibility, trying to get sympathy. But Maya's voice was too real, too cracked around the edges. She hasn't shown up for work in 2 days. Her phone's off. She didn't show at her mom's. They found her car near Lake Brant. Doors locked, purse inside. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was a slideshow of images I didn't want. Odessa's robe on the kitchen chair, the broken yellow plate, the way she had smiled when she thought I was gone for good. I didn't want to care, but my chest was burning like someone had opened a furnace door. Maya, I said finally. Have you told the police? Yes, she whispered. But they're already asking questions about you. They said she mentioned you a few days ago. Something about being afraid you'd come back. I laughed. Not the happy kind. The brittle kind. The kind that means you're seconds from falling apart. Afraid I'd come back? I'm the one she erased. I didn't threaten her, Maya. I know, she said quickly. But there's something else. She told me Odessa had been acting strange lately, paranoid, distracted. She had started skipping work, calling in sick, deleting photos off her social media. The night before she disappeared, she had dinner with someone. Not Reed. Not Kellen. A man Maya didn't recognize. She said she was meeting an old friend. Someone who knew you both. That sentence sat in my head like a ticking bomb. Someone who knew us both. My stomach twisted because I could only think of 2 people who fit that description, and one of them was dead. The next morning, I went back to the house. I shouldn't have. I knew it was a mistake, but the curiosity, it's like a disease once it gets into you. The police tape was already up, bright yellow, flapping lazily in the morning wind. The neighbors stared through curtains as I parked at the curb. I didn't go inside. I just stood on the porch, staring through the window like a stranger looking at someone else's life. Everything was cleaner than it used to be. The living room had been staged. Police must have tidied after their sweep. But something on the kitchen table caught my eye. The knife. The same one that had started it all. It was lying there, neatly placed on top of a plastic evidence bag. The strawberry jam was gone, replaced with something dark and rust-colored. I felt a pulse behind my eyes, a cold wash through my veins. And before I could stop myself, I whispered her name out loud. Odessa. That was when I saw it, tucked under the knife, half hidden by the edge of the evidence tag. A piece of torn notebook paper, folded twice. Someone had missed it, or maybe someone had wanted me to find it. I reached through the broken window latch and fished it out. On it, written in her familiar looping handwriting, were 6 words that changed everything. You said you'd never really leave. I read it over and over until the words blurred. She had written it in blue ink, my pen, the one I always kept on the counter. The date in the corner was 2 days after I disappeared. 2 days before she vanished. Maya kept calling, but I couldn't pick up. I just sat there in the car, staring at that note, trying to understand. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something crawling and cold that whispered maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one who had been watching. Because when I looked up from that note, the front window curtain of the house across the street moved. Slowly, like someone had been there all along, waiting for me to show up. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. By the time I left the house that day, I didn't know what reality I was walking back into. Everything felt slightly off-kilter, like the world had tilted 2 degrees while I wasn't looking. I kept seeing the note, her handwriting, those 6 haunting words, flashing behind my eyelids like an afterimage from a flashbang. You said you'd never really leave. And the longer I thought about it, the more it stopped sounding like a guilt trip and started sounding like a warning. I didn't go back to the motel. I didn't feel safe there anymore. I wasn't sure where I felt safe, honestly. For all the control I thought I had over this situation, leaving her, disappearing, reclaiming my narrative, I now felt like a man standing on a chessboard he didn't realize he was part of. I drove 3 towns over and checked into a roadside inn that didn't ask for ID. Cash only. The room smelled like mothballs and wood polish, and the blinds didn't close all the way, but at least it was anonymous. I turned off my phone. Again, I even pulled the battery out and left it on the bedside table. That old paranoia had returned, only now it wasn't abstract. Someone had been watching me. That movement in the curtain wasn't my imagination. I replayed it over and over in my head. A slight shift. Deliberate. And the worst part? I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever it was hadn't been watching the house. They'd been watching me watch the house. I barely slept that night. Muesli, my dog, lay curled up at the foot of the bed, occasionally perking his ears as if hearing something I couldn't. I tried to tell myself it was just the ice machine humming, the plumbing, the wind. But deep down I knew. There was a silence in the room that wasn't natural. A kind of held breath, like something waiting just out of reach. In the morning, I found something tucked under my windshield. A manila envelope. No name. No return address. Just 2 words scribbled across the front in black marker. You forgot something. I froze. Looked around the lot. Nothing but parked cars, faded lines, an old couple arguing over coffee in the room across from mine. I opened the envelope slowly, pulse hammering in my throat. Inside were 3 photographs. The first, me, sitting on a bench outside the motel 2 days ago. Hoodie on, coffee in hand. The second, me standing in front of Odessa's house yesterday, just before the curtain moved. The third, a shot through the motel window, me, asleep on the bed, arm draped over muesli. Taken from outside. At night. There was no note. No signature. Just the photos and one final piece of paper. A copy of that same handwritten message from Odessa. You said you'd never really leave. Only this time, the handwriting wasn't hers. It had been rewritten. Carefully, slowly. Same words. Different hand. I sat back against the car door, feeling like my stomach had flipped upside down. The edges of the paper felt greasy, like someone had held it too long, pressed into it too hard. Someone was trying to pull me back in, but not Odessa. And then my phone rang. I stared at it. Even though it was still turned off, battery removed. It was ringing anyway. That wasn't possible. And yet, there it was, screen black, no numbers, just that dull, vibrating hum. My spine went cold. I grabbed it, yanked it apart, checked every part of it. No signs of tampering. No explanation. Just silence when I put it to my ear. Then a click. Then a voice. Male. Calm. Cold. Almost amused. Stop trying to vanish, Calven. You're not the only ghost in this story. Then the line went dead. I sat there for what felt like an hour, heart beating so loud I couldn't hear anything else. And the worst part wasn't the call. It wasn't the photos. It wasn't the fact that Odessa had disappeared and I might be next. It was that I recognized the voice. Barely, but enough to know that whoever this was, they hadn't come out of nowhere. They had been around us. The whole time. And I think I just realized why Odessa was smiling the day I left. Because she wasn't afraid of me disappearing. She was afraid of what might follow me back. I drove for 5 hours that morning, heading nowhere in particular, just watching mile markers pass like seconds on a clock I didn't trust anymore. My hands gripped the steering wheel harder than I meant to. Every truck that passed me felt like a threat. Every road sign looked like it had been moved an inch to the left. Something in the world had shifted, like someone had taken reality and bent it, just enough to make me question every memory I thought was solid. I kept going until I crossed the state line, pulled into a rest stop that smelled like diesel and bleach. Muesli refused to get out of the car. Smart dog. The voice on the phone. I still couldn't pin it down exactly. It wasn't Reed, not Kellen, not anyone I could clearly tie to Odessa. But I knew that voice. I knew it the way you know a scar by touch, not by sight. I sat on a concrete bench behind the restrooms and tried to breathe. That's when I remembered the box. The one I hadn't burned. 2 weeks before I left, I packed up a few things I couldn't bring myself to throw out. Photos, old letters, a playlist burned to a CD, one of those little memory things no one uses anymore. I was going to toss it in the fire pit behind the motel and be done with it. But something stopped me. I shoved it into the storage unit I used to keep tools in, under a fake name, paid in cash. I hadn't touched it since. Now, that box felt radioactive. I drove there. Fast. Like something would vanish if I waited. The storage unit was still there, nestled between a closed-down carpet warehouse and a shuttered martial arts studio. My key worked. The lights flickered like a bad omen. But the box was untouched. Exactly where I left it. Top shelf. Back corner. I pulled it down, hands trembling. The first thing I saw wasn't the letters. It was a flash drive. No label. Not even in a case. Just wedged between 2 envelopes like a forgotten weapon. I'd never put it there. I didn't even recognize it. I stared at it for a long time, like it might explode. Eventually, I took it to the motel's business center. A dusty, sad computer behind a fake potted plant and a vending machine filled with expired trail mix. I plugged it in. It auto-ran. No password. Just a folder called Auditions. I opened it. There were 12 video files, each labeled with a date and a name. Most I didn't recognize. But 3 of them, I knew all 3. Reed, Kellen, and me. I clicked the one with my name first. The video was grainy, clearly filmed on a webcam. And it wasn't of me. It was someone pretending to be me. Sitting at a desk, wearing clothes like mine, voice slightly off, eyes too calm. He looked directly at the camera and said, "Hi, I'm Calven, and I'm looking to disappear. I want something cleaner than closure." The voice was wrong. The tone too smooth. Like someone had studied me and was now auditioning to be the version of me Odessa wanted. The next file, Reed. Same format. I'm Reed. I'm a distraction. A story that ends too early. Then Kellen. I'm Kellen. I'm the thrill. But I burn out fast. Each man, each file, confessing not to what they'd done, but what role they played. Like characters in a script. Odessa's script. And the 12th file? I opened it last. There was no name. Just a title. Final cast. In it, Odessa sat in a chair. Hair tied back. No makeup. Raw. She looked right at the camera and smiled. Not wide. Not cruel. Just tired. Almost relieved. Then she said, "This is how you take your story back." Then the screen cut to black. No credits. No explanation. Just silence. I sat there staring at the screen, mouth dry, heart slamming against my ribs. The videos weren't recent. The dates were years old. Before we even got married. Before she ever told me I was no longer a priority. This had started long before I even knew I was in the story. This wasn't about a breakup. This was a narrative she had curated, edited, like a documentary with no ending until she decided it was finished. And now she was gone. And I was the only one left holding the script. Suddenly, I understood something that made my blood run cold. Odessa hadn't disappeared because she was afraid of me. She disappeared because someone else was writing her ending. And she knew I'd be the only one who might notice it was a rewrite. I watched the videos again. Every single one. Not because I needed more answers. Because I wanted to understand the kind of mind that could turn life into performance, love into casting. Odessa had never wanted a husband. She had wanted a narrative. One she could control. One where everyone played their part, and then quietly left the stage when they were no longer interesting. But real life doesn't follow a script. And I had finally stopped auditioning. I thought about deleting everything, wiping the drive, tossing it into a lake. But I didn't. Instead, I mailed it to Maya. No note. No explanation. Just the footage and a return address to a P.O. box that no longer existed. She could do what she wanted with it. She could bury it, expose it, burn it. I didn't care. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. As for Odessa, 3 weeks later, she showed up. Not dead. Not kidnapped. Not lost in some cinematic twist. She simply reappeared, checked herself into a private psychiatric facility 2 states away. Said she was working through some things. No police statement. No press. No closure. Just a soft erasure. Maya told me in a voicemail I never returned. I didn't need to speak to her. I didn't need anything from any of them anymore. I had finally done the one thing Odessa never thought I would. I let go. I started over in a quiet town where no one asked questions. Found a job doing something that didn't require me to smile when I didn't want to. Bought a secondhand pickup that smelled like pine and old records. Most days I walked musely down the river trail, let him chase dragonflies, let the past stay behind me like footprints I don't turn back to look at anymore. People think disappearing means running. They think it's cowardice, or fear, or failure. But here's the truth. Sometimes disappearing is an act of healing. Sometimes it's how you start breathing again. Odessa? She'll be fine. She always lands on her feet. People like her do. And maybe one day, she'll write a different ending for someone else. One where she doesn't mistake love for possession, attention for validation. As for me, I stopped waiting for people to prioritize me. I made myself the priority. And that changed everything. The last thing I unpacked in my new place was a photo. Not of her. Of me. A real one, mid-laugh, wind in my face, taken by a stranger at some roadside market. I stuck it on the fridge with a magnet that reads, "Be the plot twist you needed." And I finally understood what freedom feels like. Not silence. Not revenge. Not distance. Just peace.